Hello. Uh, Good evening, and my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking about the crisis in Africa, and so it's very important that we make a statement. I know it's quite important, but I will be talking about these issues. It is very imperative that the crisis in Africa is an issue that has been totally neglected by the international community. You all know that there is a series of coups. Somebody may ask, what is a coup? Okay, it's a form of military takeover of a civilian government. And that is what is a simple French word they call coup d'etat. Coup d'etat, simply a military takeover an existing government. Sometimes they call a civilian government. But the crisis in Africa, as we all know, is something that has been in the pipeline. You all know that when it comes to Africa, the world community pay a deaf ear when it comes to issues related to Africa, and most especially the West African region. Most especially the West African region. They never take issues related to West Africa as a matter of urgency. For example, you may not be familiar with this. In 2016, there was a crisis, or there is still the crisis, is still ongoing in West Africa. Southern Cameroon, as you all know, maybe you all know Cameroon. Of course, they say it is a Republic of Cameroon. So Cameroon is made up of two identical separate nations. Like Canada. Canada, you have the French Canadian and the British Canadians. So they're made up of two identical countries with different culture, different linguistic, political, and economics. So in Cameroon, I speak, Cameroon is made up of two unique, different identical nations. The Southern Cameroon, which was the British colony, and the French speaking, which is a French colony. So these two separate nations, by virtue of the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV, it indicates that these two nations, the Southern Cameroon, which is the English speaking, and the French. So why is it? Because certain area they have mineral deposit, and this mineral deposit is constantly the problem that is continue to provoke the crisis, and it all have to do with France. It all has to do with France. France is the most worst unscrupulous nation when it comes to Africa. I'm very frank and I will be very brutal about it. The crisis in West Africa had to do with France, and France is the mastermind. France believes that Africans are so stupid, they are unintelligent, that Africa has no memory, Africa has they have no thinking ability, and that is exactly what is happening in Niger when France is being kicked out of Niger, because France believes that Africans are so stupid, they're useless, they have no memory, they have no thinking ability. Why will you tell an African that in their country, in Africa, that they have no power to to ask the military of France that are stationary in Africa, does Africa have a military base in France? Of course, they claim that they protect. No, France is responsible for the insurgency that is occurring in the entire West African region. France sponsoring insurgency. I am saying it clear. France sponsored insurgency to overthrow government, and Africans have become frustrated with this France attitude towards France. And so they believe that Africans are so stupid, they are unintelligent, they lack memory, they have no feeling, they have no belief, and so France has to tell them what to do. And that is what is causing this crisis that is erupted in West Africa. And especially Niger. Niger is a clear example because Africa has grown frustrated with France. Africa has grown frustrated with France. So both monetary, financial, both all aspects of economic principles, France distort African, disrupt their resources, and to fight the French while the people of Africa are suffering. So now, let's look back to the question of Southern Cameroon, then I will go back to the crisis in West Africa as a whole. The United Nations Resolution 1514 XV specifically says that those colonial territories that were under the Allied administration be given the rightful independence. The people of Southern Cameroon in 2016, a crisis erupted which is still persisting. The crisis is simple. The people of Southern Cameroon should have had their independence, but that independence were never given. That independence of the people of Southern Cameroon was never given, despite the fact that we have written to the United States government, we've written to the UK government, we've written to every member of the government. Of course, when it comes to West Africa, they undoubtedly looking at it as though we, the Africans, has no voice, and so therefore we have no purpose. Maybe because we don't have the nuclear weapon capability. Maybe because we don't have the arsenal. Maybe we are not like North Korea where we have all the nuclear that will draw their attention. And this is very painful feelings that we have because when we raise issues, it's never taken into consideration. It's never regarded. It always look at though we have no voice to speak up. And that is exactly what is happening now. You have all the various coup d'etat. You have all the various crises that is happening in West Africa. Because they look upon Africa as irrelevant to the society. Let's take, for example, the United States. The Department of African Affairs, it seems like it's non-existent. I'm very honest, I'm frank about it, because we've written to the Department of Africa, U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs. It seems the office does not exist. It seems that it's just completely closed. And of course, we have the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He cares less about Africa. I mean, when you look at the president's background and philosophy, Joe Biden has been a very strong supporter of African for liberty and freedom. But unfortunately, when you look at his secretary, it seems there is total disconnection when it comes to in terms of Africa as a whole. Now, and that painful feeling is what is reverberating in Africa as in general. You know? Now, on the question of Southern Cameroon should have got its independence per United Nations Resolution 1514 XV, which specifically state that those territories that were under the colonial administration be given their rightful independence. So how does France manipulate? France understood this concept and understand that they have no prerogative power to intervene in Southern Cameroon. So therefore, the relationship with La République du Cameroun offer a foundation for France to meddling and use La République as a bridge to deprive the people of Southern Cameroon on their privilege, their right, and freedom to be as a sovereign nations. In fact, the people of Southern Cameroon has a sovereign government. Prior to coming with this La République du Cameroun, the people of Southern Cameroon had a sovereign government. In fact, Southern Cameroon was the first democratic institution in entire West Africa, the Southern Cameroon. It is the first democratic elected government under the administrative authority to transfer power to an elected government. But yet, they have not been able to articulate their sovereign identity. And that is why you see what is happening in Niger is because of France continue to meddling things that they can control its colonial territory as though they were just an army or sheep or goat that were placed in a fence so that they can remotely control. And I think it is imperative that Africans need to realize that this critical moment of liberation, freedom from foreign control, freedom, and I think it's time Africans start to look at their defense mechanism. Their defense mechanism. So any leadership meeting of Africans must look at the defense mechanism. It's a vital tool to be able to be on the table. I remember President of Kenya, William Ruto. He says, you either be on the table and you cannot be on the table because you won't be recognized. And what are the symbols to be on the table when it comes to vital discussion? It's because of your arsenal. And so leaders of Africa need to embark on this philosophy of total complete defense system. And this will begin by an institution, an educational system for Africa that reflects the technological know-how. And this is a vital tool that Africa must embark, because we cannot be on the table if we have no tools for defense mechanism, because that is what is going to. France is in Africa because they believe that they have nuclear arsenal. So therefore, if they are the protective mechanism, because Africa cannot protect itself. So who are we protecting? From France invasion? Of course, you all saw what is happening in Niger. It is clear example that a defense mechanism should be the philosophy of all African nations. That defense system is vital. If you hope and thinking that you will be on the table with vital discussion. Of course, you saw how Africans are being grouped like a bunch of animals placed in a vehicle to participate in our occasion. This demonstrates this inability that Africa are not recognized or valued as a vital force. Despite the fact that 100% of the mineral supply worldwide come from Africa, and yet Africans are slaves in these vital resources, and they have no zero opportunity to speak up, because certain nation we call France believe that he or they are the global force and must determine what Africa needs. So it is very, very essential and important that leaders of Africa must look at the defense capability and institute mechanism and education system that reflect on the defense system and change the culture of Africa to reflect the new avenue of dynamic research, technology, and scientific research. Is vital for Africa. It's vital for African survival. It's vital for global initiative and global responsible form of government worldwide. We understood China emerged after a few, less than 20 years ago. China emerged and become a superpower. We all know how they grow and develop. Now let's look at economic and financial aspect. Let's look at economic and financial aspect. In financial aspect, let's look at France controls 14 African countries, of which Niger is the one that is advocating for complete liberation and freedom. How does France manipulate the financial market to disingenuously control Africa? Well, the CFA, France believes that the 14 countries that utilize monetary value called the CFA is glue or tied to France. France controls that every amount generated, 50% must be deposited in Caisse Communautaire Française. France utilized the amount of money in which is African money that is deposited to Caisse Communautaire Française and loan it to Africa at a higher interest rate. Do you understand? Do you get it? France take money. They take from Africa that they put in their Caisse Communautaire Française, loan that money to Africa at a higher interest rate. Money taken from Africa, loaned back to Africa at a higher interest rate. And threaten Africa for default of non-payment. Do you understand? I think we have come to the point where Africa must decide its destiny, its future. And to do so, Africa needs to break away from France's economic bloc and reinstitute a monetary system that does not have any printing authority of France. Why should France? We don't have the 14 African countries doesn't have a visa free to France. The 14 African countries do not have a visa free to France, and yet they control the economic of Africa and dictate how they should be governed. That is a disgust. Africa must be able to gain access its money, his financial aspect, and the printability in which the money has to be put in circulation based on the economic resources, based on economic dynamic mechanism. It is very essential, it is imperative, it is that Africa must take this as a matter of urgency. Back to the question of Southern Cameroon, as I earlier said, back to the question of Southern Cameroon, it is imperative that Southern Cameroon was deprived of their right to exist, their freedom, despite the fact that the sovereign state of Southern Cameroon gained her independence, should have been recognized as a sovereign state. The British government inadvertently ignored the concept of this United Nations. And each time we express our willingness, they say, oh, we are talking to La Republic, we are talking to... Of course, you all been witnessing the crisis in Ukraine. While Russia has a strong tie with Africa, but when you look at the relationship, how the problem is being dealt with, and you look at how the crisis in Africa has been dealt with, and that is why you see Africans are looking for alternative friendship and leadership. They are looking for alternative because this problem of Africa did not arise in a single second. It has been persistent over time, and Africa has witnessed this hypocrisy that their issues are never been addressed. For example, France. France does not have a veto power at the United Nations, just like William Ruto, the president of Kenya, that you must have to be on the table before decisions are made. Of course, Africa does not have a veto power. So France believe that since they have a veto power, they control Africa, so they have to drain. And that is why the voting at the United Nations, 14 African countries always vote unanimously in support of France. So France believe that these animals, or African they call sheep, les animaux, the West Africa. So they always vote in favor of France, despite the fact that the dynamic leadership is not favor to Africa. Let's look, how does France manipulate the West Africa? Look, the West Africa, the United Nations Permanent Representative is a Francophone. The OAU Secretary General is a Francophone. The the African ambassador to the United Nations was removed unjustly, because he spoke the dynamic culture of Africa and what Africans want. And so because of that, it was removed. And who removed? A French colony that the Secretary General is a vital force for France. And when it comes in terms of vote or leadership, these 14 always vote and block in favor of the Francophone, despite a change advocated by the rest of the other African nations. So minimize this leadership. So each time Africa need to embark on a new dynamic culture and restructuring the entire African as all. And Africa can do this. Africa can do this if they need to understand that freedom is now. Freedom is for the common good of Africa. Leaders of Africa should provide an avenue, resources to assist in infrastructural development for the goodness of all Africa. It is imperative that Africa need to come to the table. I know the first meeting that is held in Kenya, that is presided over by the Kenyan president, is the beginning of this vital infrastructural relationship. It's the beginning of new vital infrastructural relationship that must be built by Africa in order to meet the new changes, dynamic of Africa. Why should Africa, the greenest pasture on the planet, its citizens has to be drowned crossing to Europe? Why? There is no clear reason why Africans should be drowning crossing to Europe when they have every aspect. They need infrastructural investment and to begin. Okay, let's talk about the United Nations. United Nations. The IMF, the World Bank. The World Bank does not function for the interest of Africa. As I speak, the World Bank does not stand for the interest of Africa. And so therefore, Africa need to abolish transaction with the International Monetary Fund, because it's an organization dedicated for France. It doesn't dedicate for Africa. Why should Africa be drowning crossing to Europe when the same procedure can be done? Infrastructural investment is the key that Africa, and it began by having a leadership that has vision. Africa must have a leadership that has vision, and that vision must be put into practice. The vision must have a goal. The goal must have an objective. The objective must be put into focus, and that focus is the manifestation that will prevent Africa from drowning crossing into Europe. Why should Africa be drowning crossing into Europe? Hello.
Oh, I didn't mean to accept you. I was, as you are here. Oh, why
Yes.
are you? Why are you sideways?
Oh, I think it's because of the position. Sorry. Okay, let me. Sorry.
You're about, do you know what? You're about me, right? My technology as well. I always do that. Don't worry, you're not alone. Seriously.
Yes, go ahead. You know, I don't know if you were following me very closely. I'm speaking about the issues that is going on in Africa, especially the recent coup d'état. Coup d'état is a form of military taking over in Africa. But the crisis is something that has been persisting. And this had to do with France. France is a major problem that is causing crisis in Africa. And that is why I am bringing this for people to understand what has caused the crisis. The foundation of this crisis in West Africa is because France never paid close attention to the problems or the crisis going on in Africa. You know, and so it has impacted so many. Let's take, for example, you find so many Africans drowning, crossing through the Mediterranean, you know. But what will I ask? The mineral resources in Africa are so overwhelmed. But why should Africans be drowning? It's because France prevents this avenue, this opportunity for investment infrastructure. And I also talk about the World Bank or the IMF. The IMF was never intended for the development of Africa. And that is why you see this crisis has erupted in Africa. So I don't mean to take so much, but I thank you for joining me in this broadcast.
Right. Okay. Right. Like politics. I don't know what happens in politics. All I know, okay, is that there are a lot of people in the world that are suffering. There are a lot of people in the world and children in the world that have no roof over their head. They sleep on the streets. There are
Absolutely.
people suffering all over the world. And um, I'm not French, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
But, but, but listen, we have a problem in the world. Okay. We have a massive problem in the world.
Absolutely.
We have too much greed in the world and not enough love and respect for anybody. Like, I am lucky to have been to Africa, and
Thank you so much. Thank
I'm
you.
blessed. It is an amazing, beautiful country. And there is a lot of poverty in Africa and an immense poverty in Africa. And I think that is probably one of the reasons why young Africans leave, because they feel that Europe has these amazing opportunities and that they're going to become amazingly rich and amazingly this and amazingly that. That's not what happens. Everybody is overwhelmed all over the world. And we're overwhelmed by elites and politicians that make decisions for normal people, because we elect these people. We pay these people to work for us. So then they thought they should answer to the people. And people in general do not want war. People do not want children fighting. They don't want it. People do not, the general people don't want it. And I think it's an amazing thing that you've come on and you've had your say. And I totally respect it, and I totally respect what you are trying to do. And I think more people should. And just not to forget that the problem is not actually the people, it's the elites. And the only way that anyone's going to stop this is that there's no elites. But then how do you run countries? This is the problem. People need to just stand up and say stop. right? Nobody should be hungry. Nobody should be living on the streets. There is enough resources in the world to feed every single person in this world and house every single person in this world. And as human beings, right, we should be completely ashamed of ourselves, because I'm totally ashamed to be a part of the human race. And that's my say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your comment. I mean, it's amazing because you are not speaking as somebody, an observer. You have been physically in the environment. You have seen exactly what is going on, and you are not speaking like someone who probably read from a book. That will be different. You actually witness the problems and you've been part of the problem. And, raising your voice, I'm glad you bring up that point. And so that is exactly what I am trying to emphasize. Africa has a dynamic resources. As you rightly said, the leadership problems. And the leadership problems also associated, but the most chaotic part of it is France. France is the key problems. Although there are other supporting nations, Because let's take, for example, the crisis in Niger. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I've heard that there's a big crisis going on in Nigeria. I really
No, it's not
don't.
Nigeria. It's Niger. It almost sounds like Niger. They call Niger.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
not to.
So the problem is, imagine French military, like the citizens, if you look at the condition in which the children are working in the mine, are deplorable. Children that they should be attending school, they should be having their education. They are working in the mine, but yet
Right,
they
okay.
live basically on the poorest financial aspect. Whereas when you look at the France itself, they have their military, they have every aspect of life, but they don't influence how the economy should benefit those citizens. And that's why you see unanimously the citizens are asking the French embassy, the French military, the French everything. Why should French military establish in Niger?
They've got nothing to do in Niger.
Exactly. It's
Nobody really. Right, it's a bit of a. See, the problem is it's such a wider problem, right? So you say France. I don't think you to when you like generalize. It's not France. It's the elites and the leaders of France, and those leaders in France, right, and all the G7 or G8 or G7, whatever they are, right? They all sign their little deals behind everybody's back. That don't think that your own government doesn't know what's going on. Don't be blindsided to think that all the elites, right, that they make this happen, and always the people that pay are the ordinary people that have asked for nothing. And Africa, let me tell you something about Africa. Africa will be the #1 leader of the world. And I will tell you why. Because you have all the resources needed. And you have them in abundance. So, the problem with Africa is because you've had too many corrupt, greedy leaders.
absolutely indeed.
And Africa does not even make a secret of the corruption. They're quite open about it. It's quite widely known, and they don't hide it. That is the thing. And whereas in different countries, they do it in different ways. They hide it in different ways. They're not as alert.
Exposed.
Yeah. The thing is, we're not on this planet long enough, and we are all immigrants here, all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely true indeed.
And, we need to look after each other. And if any of our groups can support you, and nobody wants war, nobody wants war. The people that want war are obviously the elites and the people that gain financially out of people dying.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. That's a critical point that you have raised, and that is vital. And you also indicate that Africa should have been one of the richest country on the planet, despite with its vast resources. But yet,
even your resources, even if a lot of the resources are gone in Africa, mark my words, Africa will be number one on the planet. Watch. Watch. Watch.
and so the key point that Africa need to enumerate is to look at the corruption system and begin a policy to diminishing and uh, routing all the corruption system, and look at a structure or a form of government that reflect a free will government that reflect the entire Africa. And you know, there is a meeting that is going on in Kenya. They talk about the climate change, but I listened to the open statement made by the host country, President William Ruto of Kenya, who is the current president of Kenya, and he's the host country of the meeting of the all climate going on in Kenya. But he make it a statement clear that the meeting is going to be uncomfortable, but people, Africa, should believe that they are at home. And I enjoyed that open statement that he made. Even though the statement is going to be uncomfortable for the visitors, but they should understand, feel free that they are at home. And this is the beginning of the new leadership and culture that need to be installed, that Africa need to start changing and looking for the free will that will inculcate the leadership that will include every global African to look for infrastructural development for the entire continent of Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I think Europe is in not much of a better place than Africa, to be honest. Do you know that?
Absolutely.
Everything is just the whole world, America. I mean, the ones that are strong at the minute is Russia, China, India. So everything else around is collapsing, and Europe is collapsing as well. I don't know what the big
Absolutely.
agenda. I don't know what the big agenda is, but there's a massive agenda going on in Africa somewhere. I know that much. And the only people
Absolutely.
the only people is us, all of us together. Maybe you should start up a campaign that you know, in every country, do people go on the street and like, stop? We need to stop fighting. They need to stop fighting on apparently our behalfs. There wouldn't be any fighting. There wouldn't be any wars on our behalfs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely true indeed. Absolutely.
Elites, and it's up. There are more people, ordinary people. So the majority have more power. So I don't understand what the problem is of the human race when we have the majority to say to the people that make these decisions on apparently what is best for the world. We know what's best for the world, and what's best for the world is peace, love, and everyone can have something to eat and a roof over their head. That is really not too much to ask in 2023, to live in peace with your neighbour. Have we not learned anything as human beings? Not a lot, have we, really? I think we're going backwards, if anything.
You know, I love the point you made that we are in a short moment in this planet, that we are in a short moment, that we are in a transition in this planet. And that is a very good point that you raise. And, you know, why can't we live in a harmony, in love, in dynamic, in having a cordial relationship with our neighbors, as you said, with our brothers, with our sisters, irrespective of what color we bring to the table, you know?
Let me tell you what is happening though in France, because I'm in France at the moment. Now, the French people, I think, are going to start going into the streets. There are protests starting already that have happened in Paris and in different cities at the embassies, and I think they're calling for Macron, so yeah, for him to resign. I think who gives him his orders, which I think is all the G7 and whoever gives them their orders, basically, um, they're going to end up falling because the world cannot continue. Like, because their thing is we're overpopulated. We're overpopulated. So they need to get rid of 50 million people.
I know. And so they are looking for those areas where those listings can be manipulated. Exactly. You know, but it is very unfortunate, We are in a transition in this planet, We need to provide an avenue, an opportunity for everyone by put the playing field level for everyone to have the opportunity. And that in this transition period that we are in this planet, we should be able to have an enjoyment environment where we feel that we are a species, a special species of people that we have to benefit, and that we don't restrict a certain people because of their color, because of their origin, because of how they look, but we need to look people as a human being. This is one point I usually made, one statement I usually made. I said, for example, when you are in a hospital and they needed a blood transfusion, the doctor does not look whether you came from Uganda or you came from China or you came from Europe or you came from United States or you came from South America. But what they look at your hemoglobin level, is it compatible? So the compatibility is what will allow the hemoglobin to be transfused. So it doesn't indicate that you must have to be a person from this person, you must have to be from South America, you know, be Asia. It's the compatibility. So if they can look people from the view of compatibility, that everyone should be friendly, irrespective of where your origin, where you come from, and how this is, I think it is vital for all of us, It is vital for all of us.
And it comes down again to what you are fed in society as children, what you learn, what you are taught and indoctrinated by what the elites allow to be fed down. And then you see, it's very easy to divide people, especially for the people at the top. Very, very easy.
Absolutely.
Because you see,
they are the minority.
Yeah. And their priority is to create division. And if you create and you're divided, you conquer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So everything that goes on creates division, creates problems, and then this one is, yeah, you're doing that. Oh, well, now, because there's a problem with Nigeria, which is to do with the elites and the people that run all these.
At the top.
Yeah. So now, they're not really going to like the French. And they're not going to really like them because they really don't understand that the problem does not come from the people. It doesn't come from you or I. Nobody, we come from the same place. We come from the same origins. We come from the same cells. We are all related.
Absolutely.
We are all related. Every single one of us. There's not one of us that want division. The elites and the people that run the countries. And people are starting bit by bit to wake up to it. And it's taken 2023 and all this technology, because this technology is amazing, and it also can be really bad, but it's an advantage for us. It's an advantage for us because that gives us some kind of freedom still to be able to express ourselves freely, and to realize that, I have a gentleman that is upset and worried and anxious and, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Why are these people doing this? Trying to understand. And you've come to another person that doesn't understand it, but together, we can support each other to, make other people understand it. And that's the way we win. It's not, we can't play into their hands, because we're buggered if we do. And people have for too long.
I just want to take a moment to thank you for just joining me in this live broadcast. I really, really appreciate you. And I would like to have more opportunity for all of us to talk about issues that is vital, not only for us, but for the world, Africa, the world in general. And I really admire your love, I don't know how I can put it or describe it, but I really want to appreciate you for taking time to join me and really express exactly the feelings people are going through. And I really admire you, I appreciate you, and I will always love to have you more often as possible. And I appreciate you. So if you have any comment to talk again, so that the audience that are watching also can listen, so that we can then close. I really appreciate you.
Well, listen, I really hope that, people support people and other human beings, and we stop all this madness, and that we can all, each and every one of us, live in peace and harmony, and, just be kind to each other. I think the only way we can do that if us human beings, we support each other more, and we show them we're not gonna let people just kill people freely because they feel that that's the way to get what they want. It's wrong. It's wrong. And I appreciate you very, very much, and I appreciate your kind words. And, I hope you feel a little bit better knowing that nobody in France, the French people, do not support anything that Macron or the government are doing against anybody. Don't ever, ever believe that. The whole of Europe, nobody wants any of that. General people don't want it. And same with people in Africa, they don't want it. People suffer, and they've suffered too much. There's been too many wars. There's been too much greed. We need to stop it. And, I wish you all a safe and an amazing life. And we're here to support you guys. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to join me. I really enjoy your message, and I hope my audience also enjoy the message that you just deliver. And I hope that with times we'll also be able to talk more as often as we can. And it is imperative that we have to live, as you rightly say, we have to love one another. We have to, but the elites is the problems that is creating this chaotic that we are going through.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. So I bid you peace and love, and I will see you soon, and continue the fight, and know that we
All right.
you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yes.